Welcome, Bruchim Abayim. I'm Rabbi Paul, your virtual rabbi, and you have found Beit Virtuali. Now, this is the third introductory video to the PaRaDiSe of practice. I'd intended to be knee-deep in the mitzvot at this time. I wanted to do candle lighting, I wanted to do talis, I wanted to do tefillin, I wanted to do Torah. But I realized there was one more video that needed to be done, because as I started thinking of who would want to add a mitzvah to their lives, who would want to start looking deeper into why we perform these mitzvot, I realized how many memories I had of these discussions with friends and colleagues and congregation members over the last decade where people said, well, you know what, I'm just a bad Jew. And every time I hear that, it hurts and I want to go crazy, because I think the reasons we say such things actually have nothing to do with why we actually do not perform the mitzvah. So I want to parse that down a little bit. I want to look at why someone would say I'm a bad Jew, because I think that on one hand, it is an excuse, because it's hard for us to add something to our incredibly busy lives. And oftentimes the mitzvot are seen as a burden. Let's just acknowledge that. Oh my goodness, I can't observe Shabbat because all the things that I'm forced to not do. Or we can look at it as we desperately need to unplug from all the things that are giving us stress. There's so much about the mitzvot that have to do with our perspective as we sit into them. So I've broken down into three reasons why someone might say something like, oh, I'm such a bad Jew. I understand that everyone's individual and unique and everyone is an exception to the rule. But I think that if we think about it, if we are buying that ham and looking at the rabbi and saying, oh, I'm such a bad Jew, I think that honestly, there's one of three things that's really behind what we're doing. So the first one is just simply the Richard Dawkins view of Judaism. We think it's silly to begin with. Why do we even want to engage in something when our tradition is so backwards? And I'm going to spend the least amount of time on this one because I literally just finished writing a book that deals with this entire idea. So yeah, shameless marketing, shameless plug. In the next few months, you're going to see Gateways into Judaism, Volume 1, Origins, that does a lot to break down this idea. One of the chapters I go into, called the Hollywood version, reminds us that a lot of our ideas of what Judaism is come not from the Tanakh, come not from Jewish tradition, come not from the explanations in the Talmud and later midrashim, later discussions, the dialectic and the dialogical process of our religion. Oftentimes what we're actually reacting to is the picture book that we saw when we were age 3, or the bar bat mitzvah teacher who told us that we weren't allowed to ask a question. And if we say that we're a bad Jew and we're not performing the mitzvot, and what we're actually doing is thinking back to a time that we experienced a trauma where someone told us we didn't have worth, or we experienced something in our relationship with Judaism that made us see Judaism as wrong or backwards. The first thing is to ask the question, is our view of Judaism based on a trauma, or is it based on us performing due diligence, looking at the complexity, the dialogic and the dialectic of Judaism? Are we reacting against a silly picture book of animals going 2 by 2 into a literal boat? Or are we reacting against some study or the metaphors and the symbols that are contained within the depth of our Torah tradition? So just get my book when it comes out. I spend a lot of time talking about it. But more important for this video, are we aware of that? Are we saying, I never want to go to shul again because we had a bad experience at age 12? It's still a legitimate emotional reaction, but we're not reacting to Judaism or the mitzvot. We're reacting to that one teacher, or that one rabbi, or that one cantor, or that one synagogue, or that one person who said that stupid thing. It's not Judaism. That's just a human being being a human being. Second reason is an unrealistic judgment. What are we comparing ourselves to when we say we cannot perform a mitzvah? And the answer is usually we're comparing ourselves to exactly the wrong comparison. We're comparing ourselves to someone wearing a black hat, for an example, and saying, well, you know, I can never perform the mitzvah quite like they do. Or God forbid, you're comparing yourself to a rabbi or a cantor, a professional Jew. Do you know how many years we have to study in order to have that piece of paper on the wall saying that I can be a rabbi? The reality is I've studied for that as long as you've studied for the thing that makes your specialty special. And so don't judge against people who have had a different life path. You got to judge against yourself. The realistic judgment when we perform a mitzvah is, what am I improving that I did yesterday? There's a quote from the Talmud, from Tractate Sanhedrin. So it's the part of the Talmud that deals with civil law. It also deals with messianism and magic and lots of interesting stuff. But there's a quote that says you cannot descend in holiness. What that means literally is you can't go to a rabbi who has a lot of authority, and when they say no, then go to a rabbi who has much less authority. But as this is interpreted at a more spiritual level, what this means as we build upon our own practice and our own experience. when we look at how we pray, how we eat, how we're in dialogue with putting sacred and ritual clothing on our bodies, the only person we can judge that against is ourselves. And if that seems silly, you have no idea how many people, when we've really drilled down the conversation, they say, you know what, I just can't be Orthodox, and Orthodox do it the right way. Really? First of all, Orthodoxy is a term that's come about only about 150 years ago. So this idea that this is authentic Judaism, well, I've made videos on that as well. Maybe I'll put a link down as well. But you're judging against yourself. You're in dialogue with yourself and that which is greater than you. God as you choose to understand God, or as God is manifested in your life. You're not in dialogue with someone with a black hat. So if you say I'm a bad Jew, and you're saying that because you're not quite as from as someone who's living in Mea Shearim, well, guess what? They're living in Mea Shearim. They grew up their entire life doing that. You might be encountering this for the first time. This is your moment of learning. This is your mitzvah. This is your dialogue. And finally, the third number reason is the musical Oklahoma.
With you, it's all or nothing. All for you and nothing for me.
Right? Point made. With you, it's all or nothing. Either we do it right, either I go up to Torah and read for the first time, and I sound just as amazing as the greatest chazan that I've ever heard read Torah. I've heard that before. I've heard that excuse. I can't do it as well as so-and-so. I can't lead services as well as so-and-so. I don't have the most beautiful candles that my relatives rescued from Ukraine as they fled it in 1935. No, that's not a reason to not perform a mitzvah. So for the final part of this video, I want to introduce 3 words. We're going to increase our vocabulary today, and at least one of these words has a really good sound in it, so we can really practice getting our camera moist. So here it is. 3 words. B'diavad, l'chatchila, it's a good word, just say that after me, l'chatchila, and mehudar. And this is the exact not black and white. This is the exact not all or nothing. What these words mean is when we engage in the mitzvah, we understand that we don't always have the ability to put our full self into it. We don't always have the full knowledge. We don't always even have the stuff that we need to make the mitzvah as full as we would like to make it. And that's what these words are reflecting. If these words didn't exist, then we might have an excuse to say, yeah, it's all or nothing. But Judaism contains within it this thought that, b'diavad, you know what? Maybe we didn't have the right stuff. Maybe we didn't have the right knowledge, but we did it anyway. We did something. I'll give some examples in a minute. L'chatchila, we have the knowledge, we have the basic stuff, and we did it. We fulfilled the requirements, right? The statement at the end of the Passover Seder. We have done what we were supposed to do next year in Jerusalem. That's a statement of l'chatchila. If you don't know what I'm talking about, got to go to a Passover Seder this year. If you're still in a lockdown place, there's lots online. And the final word, mehudar, this is the beautification of it. This is the, I've learned how to chant Torah. Now I'm really working on the melody. I'm working on the clarity. Every single word I say, I want to understand the meaning of the words as I say it. That's mehudar. So how does this work? How does this look like? Well, I'm going to be looking at the Shabbos candles in the next video. So let's say, in the modern or late modern world, I have had an emergency at work. I'm running late. I get home 2 minutes before candle lighting time. I can't find my Shabbos candles. What I find are 2 half burned out votive candles. I stick them on the candle. I forget the blessing. I close my eyes and I say, all right, I know it's a mitzvah to light the candles. Amen. Thank you, God. And I light these votive candles. You know what? I've performed the mitzvah. I didn't perform it according to Jewish law. I didn't perform the fullness of it, but you know what? I did something. And this is part of what I'm trying to say. Every single mitzvah has a gateway into it. And sometimes that gateway is acknowledging that I don't know the answer. I've told congregation after congregation that here is an appropriate blessing if you don't know the blessing. All right, God, I know I'm supposed to say a blessing right now as I am lighting the candles. I don't know the blessing, but I know it's a mitzvah to light the candles. Amen. You know what? If that's the knowledge that you have inside of you, then that's the knowledge you bring to the table and you've fulfilled the mitzvah b'diavad. Now, if you fulfilled the mitzvah b'diavad, that's your clue to then learn the blessing. And you know what? Yes, some of you out there struggle with Hebrew. I get it. Some of you came to it later on in life. Some of you just can't make the words with your mouths. Then learn it in English. Blessed are you, eternal and our God, sovereign of the universe, who has elevated us with the mitzvot, and through the mitzvot commanded us or asked us or led us to lighting the Shabbat candles. And if you can't memorize it, look at it. So write it down. Write down the transliteration of the blessing if you want to try it in Hebrew. Say it in both. Find the way that means something to you. And once you have a blessing workable in one language or another, that's lechatchila. That's at least that part of the blessing. Now, if you rushed home and you found the 2 votive candles and you didn't even know what to do with them and you lit them anyway and you fulfilled the mitzvah b'diavad, that's a good clue for Thursday night of the next week, putting your Shabbos candles out. Or sometime during the week, going shopping or going onto Amazon and buying them. But if you've had a b'diavad moment, that is your pathway into lechatchila. It's the memory that, all right, that was a little bit stressful to not have everything prepped. So you know what? I'm going to do a little bit of work. As busy as my life is, I will take 10 minutes away from scrolling through my Instagram feed, and instead I will go on and purchase Shabbos candles. And you know what? I don't have nice enough candlesticks. What does that even mean? Who are you comparing that to? Go to a rummage sale, go to a flea market and find something that speaks to you and means something. Go to an online craft class and make something yourself. Look for something that's in a dusty box that your kids made in kindergarten. Do something that's meaningful to you. And then move into lechatchila with a blessing in the language that means something to you, putting the candles out in preparation, ready to go, lighting 18 minutes beforehand or up to 2 hours before sundown. And fulfill lechatchila. And then we move on to mehudar. What's mehudar? Make it beautiful. So you know what? You've got the candles and the candlesticks. You've got the blessing. Now sing a melody. You don't have to sing my melody. I'll give you one melody when I do the Shabbos candlesticks video. But have your table cleaned off in a day in advance. Change your work schedule if you're able to come home a few hours earlier. I know that that's not available for everyone. Spend a few extra euros or dollars or pounds and get yourself a white tablecloth that you set up the day before, coming home a few hours earlier. Create that sacred space. Create the intentionality. Because the mehudar is not only that we finally fulfilled the mitzvah, it's that we are adding our full heart and mind and soul into it. And it's not going to look like the way that your neighbor does it. You're not comparing to the person with the best singing voice. Or if you have the best singing voice, you're not comparing to someone who doesn't have the best singing voice. You are doing the best, most beautiful version that you can do, and that will change over time. See, part of this bad Jew thing is these comparisons against black and white thinking, against that person with the black hat or the most beautiful voice in the world, is that there are people out there who have been born into the mitzvah. Baruch Hashem, that's their path. They do every single mitzvah that it's possible to do, and they do it with complete knowledge, and everything is lechatchila, and they might even do it with the most beautiful voice you can possibly imagine. I will take one person who does one mitzvah with full intentionality, with their heart breaking as they're doing it, as more important than the person who their default mode is performing Tiryaga mitzvot, all 613, which, by the way, not possible since a lot of those are dealing with a temple that doesn't exist anymore. Side note. Final note for this video. Just taking a few moments to think of this last points of b'diavad and lechatchila and mehudar. Also just getting us used to saying these words. There's an example that I have given when I've taught this in synagogues and communities in the past, and that's this story that I've heard in several different versions of people in concentration camps, saving up pads of margarine, melting that into some sort of oil, ripping off threads from their prison uniforms, and then trying to light Shabbos candles. You know what? There's full statements in the Talmud about what kinds of oil we can use, what kind of wicks we can use. And you look at something like that, people dealing with the worst possible world that we can possibly imagine, even though the world around us right now is giving us some pretty ugly examples, and trying to perform a mitzvah anyway. See, this b'diavad thing, they're not really fulfilling all the obligations of halakha. But isn't this b'diavad fulfilling of the mitzvot all of a sudden the most beautiful, painful thing you've ever heard? You see, you're in dialogue with the eternal. How you understand the eternal is up to you. I can't do anything about it. This is your journey. The mitzvot are an expression of how we externally add symbols to our lives to bring out greater internal beauty, greater internal ability to relate to others. We do this via ritual practice. Unless we're a tzaddik, unless we're a saint, unless we're a bodhisattva, we need symbols to lead us to greater truths. The mitzvot, they're your path to get there. Your individual path, and what might just seem eye-rolling to someone else might be the most profoundly beautiful thing to you that leads you to a deeper truth. So I don't ever want to hear any of you ever say, I'm a bad Jew again. As long as you're in dialogue, as long as you are trying to increase the holiness in your life, as long as this is a conscious part of your life, you're not a bad Jew. You're just a Jew. You're just a human being who, like the rest of us, is trying. If you think that I do this perfectly, oh my goodness, are you mistaken? This is an everyday struggle for me. So join me in the struggle. That's the only thing you get to compare yourself is I'm struggling with it. Struggle with it. This is something that will lead you to something potentially beautiful. Let's get rid of this bad Jew stuff. Let's start just being Jewish. Thank you. Go out there and lift someone else up today. Take care. We'll see you next time.